Hey, John Harris here with the Rock Metal Podcast. Join me as we get to go behind the scenes into what goes into producing records and making music as we interview some of our favorite and soon-to-be favorite bands. And today we're chatting with Adam Gontier of St. Asonia for fans of 10 Years, Through Fire, and the Veer Union. We'll be chatting about St. Asonia's new album, Introvert, Extrovert, produced, mixed, mastered by Anton, DeLost. We'll get to hear the story about how all of that came to be and so much more. So please stay tuned to the very end. But first, let's check in with our beautiful sponsors. Asher Media Relations, doing public relations for everything loud. For your band needs to be seen and heard in print, online, and radio. Head over to AsherMediaRelations.com. That's AsherMediaRelations.com. Mention the Rock Metal Podcast and get your band noticed. Syndical Music is a full-service agency for musicians offering record label services, marketing, branding, production, and management. Head over to syndicalmusic.com. That's syndicalmusic.com. SYNDICOL music.com. Mention the Rock Metal Podcast and take your music career to the next level. Adam, thank you so much for coming on to the Rock Metal Podcast today. Go ahead and say hi to all of our beautiful listeners.
Thanks for having me, man. How you doing, everybody?
Great to have you on and talk about this amazing record. So we've got Introvert EP, we have Extrovert EP, and then Spine Farm released the two of them together as Introvert, Extrovert. We also have some tour information to chat about, both in the US and in Canada. So this is going to be an action-packed interview. I'd like to talk about the records first so we can get into the tour, if that's cool.
Yeah.
And you can take this as either one or the other EP or together as a unit, but what was the greatest moment for you producing this record? And it could just either be one of the EPs or maybe, the album as a whole.
Yeah, I think being able to get back in the studio and working on music was a big thing, because the couple of years that we weren't able to leave our houses or whatever to do anything, that was that sucked. So I think the whole thing was really, making both the EPs was pretty special, just because it felt great to get out and great to get back to doing what we love to do. Yeah. So, there were a lot of good, really cool moments in making the album. We had a guest on a song called Chew Me Up on Introvert. Johnny Stevens from Highly Suspect was a guest, and that was a highlight for sure. Making the two EPs. But yeah, I think just in general, being able to create music, and we actually recorded it in person in a studio in Toronto and stuff, and that was important to do that. So yeah, just being able to get out and actually do music again was pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being benched for a couple of years obviously sucks, but getting back together. Now, as a result of that, this material, you mentioned going into a studio and crafting it. Did you guys have a lot of material ready to go, or did you guys just kind of save it until you were all together?
Yeah, for the first EP, Introvert, we did have a lot of material, just because being at home for those 2 years, there was a lot to write about. There was a lot going on. There was no shortage of stuff to write about. So yeah, there's a lot of material written for the first EP, Introvert. And then shortly after we recorded that, I actually moved from Toronto down to Nashville. So for the second EP, Extrovert, I did a lot of co-writing with people down here, and got together and collabed with just a bunch of different people in Nashville. So that was really cool, and that was that was kind of the reason we called it Extrovert.
Very cool. And we could spend probably the rest of the interview just asking this basic question, which is working with people in Nashville. Take us through that. How different is that from working with people, say, in Toronto?
Well, it's quite a bit different. Getting together to write with somebody in a room with a goal of writing a good song is always a little bit weird. And I've always felt that it's strange to be I don't know, to sit in a room and with a stranger, maybe somebody that you haven't met or whatever, and sit down and try to be vulnerable and come up with songs. It's really a different process. So, but at the same time, most of the people that I got together with down here, I had known from the past and stuff. So it was pretty it was pretty easy to do that. But yeah, it's always a little bit weird just meeting somebody for the first time and saying, okay, let's write,
Yeah.
something super heavy and deep together when we haven't even known each other for like 15 minutes,
Right. Right.
hmm
We're not
hmm
super deep and heavy, but let's do something super deep and heavy.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. What was the biggest challenge for you guys on this record? And it sounds like the two records have quite a bit going on, but there might be multiple challenges. But what was the biggest challenge for you?
Um, well, I mean, it all happened pretty seamlessly. It was a great process, and there weren't many challenges. I think that maybe the biggest challenge was having Mike Mushak record his parts remotely. And we've done that a few times now, but it was especially necessary just because the pandemic wrapping up and all the stuff, and him traveling was a little bit difficult. So I think that was probably the biggest um, challenge for us recording, was actually getting his parts and stuff to match what we were doing in the studio, and he was doing it from home, from his home computer. So that was a bit of a challenge, but our producer Anton that we worked with is uh, super amazing at stuff like that, and he just, he made it sound incredible. So
Yeah. So then that was the
mhm.
one missing body in those T dot days.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, and we recorded both the EPs in Toronto. I mean, the guys are. I'm originally from just outside of Toronto, and Kale and Cody live outside of Toronto right now, so it just makes sense to. And Anton was up there as well, so yeah, it's a nice city. So
Mhm.
it's fun to hang in Toronto for a little bit.
Now, something that you were mentioning was, getting deep and getting heavy and being vulnerable. So let's talk about some of the themes on this record. And we've got some themes from Introvert and we have some themes from Extrovert. Do they line up? What are some of the themes that are happening here?
Yeah, for Introvert, it was a lot of the writing was done during the pandemic, so there's a lot of sort of just trying to figure out what we were going through, what was happening. So I think Introvert was all written from the perspective of sitting in my little studio room there in Peterborough, not being able to leave, and so yeah, there's a lot of that on Introvert. And Extroverts, I'd say it's a little bit more hopeful. It has a bit of a hopeful vibe to it, sort of. Just when we were able to get out and start working with people again, and I did this co-writing and met with people, and it was a different experience than the first one. So um but I think the themes, there's on Introvert there's a lot of loneliness, and on Extrovert there's a lot of coming out of the shell a little bit.
As I would be the case.
Yeah, yeah.
Now you mentioned doing a little bit of remote stuff, but working in the studio. Um, any kind of unique equipment that you guys ended up using this time around? Anything that maybe surprised you, or like some go-to pieces of equipment?
Yeah, it's well, I mean, when we were recording, I've always tried to just keep it simple. Even my live show is very, I mean, I just have an amp and a foot switch, and I don't have a pedal board, and also I just try to keep it very simple, and try to do the same thing. I mean, on the record Flaw Design, we did a lot of experimenting with different sounds and different things. But this time around for these two, we just wanted to be a little bit more straightforward. So yeah, we didn't really mess around too much with it. It's always nice to have your producer like open up different plugins and try different sounds on different things in different parts of songs. So there was a lot of that when we had sort of recorded the bones of the songs. But no, I mean, other than that, it was pretty straightforward. We wanted to keep it fairly simple, just get some good tones and keep it straightforward and simple.
Yeah. Well, something you mentioned
Yeah.
was, experimenting a bit more on flawed design. And I mean, I guess kind of like a follow-up question would be this time around, what was the desire to be more straightforward? Just
Well, I think because for me, every record, I always want it to be better than the last. Of course, if that's the goal anyway. And I think on Flawed Design, I definitely wanted to experiment a bit with different sounds and textures and some key parts and piano and stuff. And we did a lot of that. and it just, this time around just felt felt natural to go back to just simple riffs and simple tones, and try to keep it very, very simple. So, but it's always different. I mean, every album's different. If I Who knows where, when we do the next one, where that'll go. It could be just no guitars and just all keys. So
Yeah. Well, something you mentioned there was, simple riffs and simple tones. Uh, does that come easy, or was there a large amount of work in, I don't want to call it dumbing it down, but, how did you go about making things more simple, or was that the more natural? You did say natural, but how did that happen?
yeah, it was more so, and this is when your producer really comes in handy. And Anton did a lot of, like, if it were up to me and I would just go for a distorted sound, and then I'd probably be like, okay, that sounds great, let's just go. But there's a lot of time. He takes a lot of time, and like most producers do, with trying to make that sort of raw, that raw simple tone, and sit with it for hours and make sure it's right. And it's I think all it comes down to sonically the rest of the band and the rest of the parts and the tracks and stuff. So there's all that kind of stuff that goes into it, which I don't really focus too much on. I just try to keep it sort of low key for what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll chat about Anton, I think, a little bit more later, because I think there's a
Mhm.
lot of cool things that we can say about him. Let's go ahead and jump into the tour. As far as I understand, you've just gotten off of a U.S. tour supporting Theory of a Deadman and Skillet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was a 6-week tour across the U.S. Yeah, supporting two killer bands. Theory of a Deadman. I've known those guys. We've known those guys since the early 2000s, when 3 Days Grace first started. Theory was one of the first bands that ever took us out on tour. So great friends of ours and great people. And yeah, Skillet, they're amazing. Put on a great live show, and they're just very, very cool people. So yeah, it was an amazing tour. We were very, very fortunate to be on it, and hopefully it goes out again soon. Here.
Yeah, very cool. And then, speaking of
Yeah.
Theory of a Deadman, there are some tour information happening here in Canada, headlining, and I believe playing as well with Theory of a Deadman.
Yeah, right now I think we are just doing the April 28th show in Peterborough, at the Memorial Center. Uh, yeah, the other shows that they are doing some headlining shows in Canada, I think. But I'm not 100% sure if we're going to be on the rest of them or not. I think we're still trying to work that out.
Okay. I
Yeah,
tried to abbreviate Theory of a Deadman, and it says Toad.
that's right. Yeah,
Totem.
Totem. Yeah,
Totem pole.
yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, more to come, but let's go ahead and check in with our beautiful sponsors. Two Madsen is responsible for producing, mixing, and mastering some of the best metal for over the last 20 years. From Meshuggah to The Haunted to Poison Black, Kemper Profiler packs for guitar players, and Easy Drummer expansion packs for programming drums. Two Madsen can take your production to a level previously unheard. Head over to twomadsen.com. That's twomadsen.com. TUEMADSEN. Click contact, fill out the info for your next project, and let Two know that the Rock Metal Podcast sent you. Wormhole Death is a modern record label, publishing, and film production company born in 2008. Getting signed to this label means global distribution, publishing, and marketing with Wormhole Death's roster of global partnerships. Head over to wormholedeath.com. That's wormholedeath.com. Submit your band and let them know the Rock Metal Podcast sent you. This is actually a cool question. I've gotten all kinds of answers from it. Spiritual answers, not so spiritual answers, either way. Because you've been through a lot. You mentioned 3 Days Grace from the early 2000s. Obviously, you've been on the scene for a long time. Getting to know other bands like Theory of a Deadman and establishing relationships like in Nashville, like you're doing now. How would you define success, though, at this stage of your career?
Yeah, that's a good question for sure. I think after being in the industry for 20 years, I think the success probably it comes with being comfortable with yourself, and comes with making music that you are making, not for other people, and for yourself. I think it's pretty important to not try to create music that you think that others think might be good. And that's sort of what everybody falls into, especially after you sign a record deal and you have to sell a certain amount of records and get a certain amount of singles. I think now, and takes a long time. It took me a long time to realize it, but yeah, it's just, I think success is being able to create what you want to create, and for yourself and for nobody else. And it's a lot easier said than done, for sure, especially in this business. It's pretty tough. I mean, I still absolutely all the time. I still, when I'm writing a song or recording a song, I'm always wondering if it's radio friendly enough, or what are people going to think about this lyric, or will this lyric resonate, as much with people and that sort of thing. And it's easy to get carried away in that. So if you can get to a point where you're making music just for yourself and not others, at least, I mean, you do create music for your fans and people that love the band and the music and stuff, but there's a line to be drawn there, I think.
Yeah. Well, something you mentioned, it was challenging to create something basically without worrying about other people. And I think, is it just at a certain point where you just know, like, millions of people are going to hear this song, and there might be some sense of responsibility maybe with that?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. There's definitely a lot of pressure, for sure. You put out, at this point, putting out songs, a certain amount of people are going to hear it. And I mean, you always want people to like it, so, I guess it's just finding that balance,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of finding balance, let's turn around back to working with Anton. Just wide open question. Talk to me about working with Anton.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's a great producer. He's a great guy. He just added a lot to what we've been doing. And he's got some really cool bands and cool work under his belt. And he's starting to work a bit more and do different projects. So yeah, we're just fortunate to be able to connect with him. And we all get along great, and the camaraderie is there we all have the same common goal of making a great record. And he's just really good at his job. And there's a lot of producers out there and a lot of guys that, or people that do tons of great work. And it's just nice to find somebody that knows what page you're on and, shares the common goal.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
On the same page and sharing a common goal.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, I'm just searching the web really quick, Anton DeLost?
Anton DeLost, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
He looks super serious, especially in this picture.
Oh yeah, he's serious guy.
Yeah.
No, he's not. We all look serious in our press shots, right?
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned being on the same page. How was that, I don't know, decided upon? Is that something that was picked up maybe in the pre-production, like the demo stage? Was that something that was a constant conversation?
No, it wasn't a constant conversation. I think more so maybe in the demo stage. Yeah, when we get together and we play, we play all the music we have. And I think it's just from that point, it's pretty clear what, where the direction's going to go. And you talk about it throughout the recording process, the individual directions for each song. But I think in general, it's just sort of laid out there. And when you're playing demos for everybody.
What's the number one thing that you would like people listening to the podcast to do right now? And that could be like hit up your socials, listen to the record, buy a ticket, I don't know, go meditate and think about happier days. Anything that you've taken with you?
If there's anything I'd want to tell people to do in terms of the band and that sort of thing, I just say check out the music. I mean, that's the biggest, that's the most important thing for me. I mean, that's why we do this and why we, make music. It's the most important thing. So I just want people to listen to the music and enjoy the songs, and hopefully it sticks with them. And, that's it. And we are going to be spending the rest of this year of 2023 and then into 24 on the road, doing a lot of shows and a lot of touring. So definitely keep your eye on our socials and our website and stuff, and our tour dates and everything are up there. So
yeah,
there'll be a lot of touring. Yeah.
Which reminds me, the Canadian tour, I'm in Edmonton. I feel forgotten.
Yeah. It's not much of a Canadian tour. It's more of an Ontario tour. when you, yeah, when like being Canadian, it's obviously I know that, but yeah, when everybody like your team is American, it's more to your team and management and label and everybody, agents, whatever they consider it a Canadian thing. But yeah, the reality is it's an Ontario Quebec tour.
Yeah.
For now, just for now. I mean, not, we'll be out west 100%.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Time for one more, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, man. Of course.
What would the Adam today tell the Adam from 20 years ago, sitting there in front of the microphone, about ready to record that song that was going to hit the radio for the first time? What advice would you have for that, Adam?
Well, for one, get off drugs. That would be my first, honestly. But no, I mean, probably just to take everything slow down a little bit, because it was such a whirlwind, right? Like we had been a band for years and we were friends for years, and before we got a record deal or anything. And then, in the early like 2001, we got the record deal, and then it just like almost overnight, it just blew up. So we got thrown into the situation that we'd always wanted and we'd always asked for. But we weren't really ready for it. We weren't, so, and for me, I was in I guess I was in a pretty crazy place. I was using and drinking and, partying. So it was a bad timing, sign a record deal in the middle of that was a little bit rough. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is I would probably say just slow down and just take it all in and take a breath, because it was pretty intense. But things are great now. And that time back then, with them, and when I left that band, I mean, it was in a completely different state of mind, and life was different. Things were, I was younger and had a giant chip on my shoulder. There was a lot going on. So, yeah, for me at the time, I needed to leave just to be able to try to get my shit together. So yeah, things are different now. I stay in touch with the guys a lot. We talk a lot. It's I think we've all grown up. We've all had kids and the family life and that sort of thing. So we're in contact pretty often, and there's no hard feelings there. Yeah, we're all pretty close, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that number one thing that you had mentioned a little bit back there, Adam, was to listen to the record, check out the socials, check out the band on tour. So go ahead and head over to the rockmetalpodcast.ca. There you can go ahead and get all of the extras from today's interview, the transcript, music videos, and as well those links so that you can stay in touch with everything Saint Asonia. So Adam, thank you so much for coming on to the Rock Metal Podcast today.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of the Rock Metal Podcast. Stay tuned, because next week we're going to be chatting with Mr. Lordi of the band Lordi. They've got a new album out, and I had the privilege of catching up with Mr. Lordi while he was on a long drive from the north of Finland to catch a plane down in Helsinki to go out on tour. Go ahead and hit subscribe in your podcast player, share it with your friends, and I'll see you next week.